Get started. So let me introduce myself. My name is Brigadier General Charles Campbell. I spent 31 years in the Air Force, flying the F-15, the F-16, the F-4. Retired after 31 years of senior military service, and I think the thing, and then I've been with the company now for 10 years, working with many of the great organizations that we've had the opportunity, and I'll share with that some of you in just a moment. The point that I'd like to make, though, is that especially as we think about interfacing with you as HR leaders, is that I am not an HR professional by any way, shape, or form, but I have certainly been a recipient and a user of HR services, and have both as a young fighter pilot and as a senior leader have integrated with our evaluation and HR system, if you will. And then the other thing that I will take just a minute, because a lot of people would not understand this, is as a fighter pilot standing in front of an F-15 fighter there, and you look at 31 years of flying aircraft, one of the things that you might not realize is that on any particular mission, when I'm working with typically a team of 3 other fighter pilots that are directly part of my team today, I had 2 real responsibilities, whether I was in combat or in training situations. And the first part of that was to execute the mission in a safe and effective way. And whether you're in training or in combat, it's an extremely dangerous environment. But the other part that you might not realize is that on any given mission, I had a training responsibility that recognized this, that on my team, I typically have an emerging leader, in other words, a more experienced kind of a junior flight leader, and I also had 2 brand new young new hires that had been through probably 2 years of training and somewhere between the 2-year, maybe 4-year point of experience as fighter pilots. And I had a responsibility, whether I was an evaluator, an instructor, a fighter weapons school instructor, at all different levels within the hierarchy of the organization, one of my major responsibilities was to train my replacement. And I realize that that's somewhat of a unique thing to the military in terms of we are constantly moving people out. Typical assignment is 2 to 3 years. So if you are a leader on a mission, it takes you 6 months maybe to get up to speed and start to be performing as a leader. But my major responsibility was to take my wisdom, my experience on how we conducted that flight today, and make sure that I was preparing the next leaders to lead the next flights. So truly, we are trainers at heart, and I would tell you that is my real passion, is in taking my experiences, 31 years in the Air Force, now 10 years of doing this work within the business environment of both the United States as well as internationally, and teaching people how to be successful in executing their missions. So I wanted to just pause and kind of share that as a background, because it's a component of what we do and who we are that perhaps is not always totally evident. So a little bit about Afterburner as we get going. Afterburner is a global training and consulting firm that's been around since 1996. In our 20 years, we've had the privilege of working with 35% of the Fortune 500, probably 80 of the current Fortune 100, and a large portion of the Global 2000 as well. We're made up of elite military team members, and what's really unique about our team members is not only did they have elite military experiences, but they also have had elite opportunities, perhaps the way I would say it, an elite opportunity to work and share their skills with these great global corporations that we have the opportunity to work with. So not only are we taking the skills that come from our backgrounds as military team members, but more importantly, we have a lot of experience in which of those skills and in what way really relates to improving the future performance of these corporations that we get the opportunity to work with. We currently do most of our work, frankly, in North American with North American teams. We're licensed and have offices in Canada, Australia, and Brazil. We've launched 5 books. We have most recently been recognized as a top small business by Forbes. So that's just a little bit of our background. Some of our focus point when we start working with organizations, we believe that there's really 3 things that are required. First off, we have to create alignment. We have to empower the organizations. We have lots of tools to do that. There are keynotes and team building and consulting kinds of days and those kinds of things. But creating inspired alignment, and I would just emphasize for 1 second how important the inspiration is to your organizations. You've got lots of tools, processes. There's lots of people out there that can bring you new tools and things like that in order to be successful. Many of them are really great. But uniquely, one of the things that we pass along as leaders to your leaders is how do you inspire the adoption of the tools that we're going to share with you. Which brings us really to the next point, which is equipping your teams and giving them actual tools. We consider ourselves to some extent, and you're going to see this in just a minute when we start talking about it, as a how-to company. So we equip your team. We don't tell you just the psychological outcomes and the inclusive ideas and be more communicative and more collaborative, but we're going to equip your teams with actual tools that will result in those kinds of outcomes. And then finally, we want to embed. So it's very important to us that we're not just a one and done, that we're not a fun and interesting conversation, but that we can actually help you value your training and HR dollars by creating a sustainable culture within the organization. How do you do that? So everything that we do is driven around this model that we call the flawless execution model. What is really remarkable to me as I consider the 21 years that we've been in business and I look back on this simple design of this model is really, I look in wonderment, because if you think about certainly the past 20 years, but even the last 10 years, and you think about how much more complex our organizational responsibilities have been, if you think about the impact of the internet and technical aspects of the organization, the technology within the organization. You think about the impact that HR and on best practices within hiring and talent management and really the war, if you will, to get the talent and the right talent that you need in the organization. And it's all so much more complex than it was 20 years ago. And I'm just amazed really at how well this organizational model has stood up. So really up at the top of the organizational model is the purpose of the organization, the high definition destination, and that's where we really create a clear, compelling, high resolution understanding of what financial expectation do we have, what workforce culture do we have to have, what is our brand look like, how do we manage talent, what kind of infrastructure do we have. And then once we create that understanding of the future and where we're going, what's our strategy to actually get there, and then what's the communication plan, as referenced by the leader's intent there. When you get down to the platform, I think this resonates with HR and the responsibilities of both HR and certainly training, and it's getting the right people in the right seats of the bus, as our buddy Jim Collins would say, giving them the training, both onboarding, initial job training, just-in-time training, sustainment training, frontline leader training, giving those right people the right training. And then we really believe that it's important that you have the right standards within the organization. And without going into great detail on it, some of the tools that I'm going to show you today are our cultural standards about how we do business. For example, many times when we talk about standards, people think of compliance and those kinds of issues within that drive the business of the business. environment. But what I'm really referring to here is that cultural standards about how we conduct our evaluation conversations with our workforce, how our leaders have leadership conversations, how do our leaders actually plan for success. And tying that all together is really the engine, tying the right people, train the right way, using these standard operating procedures, driving towards that high resolution future is really this engine about how we plan the mission in an accountable and collaborative way. We brief to align to the mission, we go out, we execute, and then we conduct a debriefing. And those are some of the areas that I'm just going to speak to as we move into, how does this really apply to HR? So once again, I know that you as HR professionals and training professionals, you have much more on your plate than what I'm going to talk about today. So what I'm going to do is just share with you my observations of working with teams, and oftentimes if you think about how are we brought into an organization, we are sometimes brought in by HR and by training because they want to provide frontline training, they want to create a culture, they want to improve the knowledge management within the organization. So those are all things that oftentimes we get brought in by the HR professional, the HR team. Sometimes we get brought in by senior leadership, the CEO, the C-suite, because they want execution, they want results. And these are all good reasons why we work with different organizations. Today, I just want to reflect on really 2 or 3 ideas that I have passion around that maybe you haven't thought about how some of these tools apply to your jobs. So I'm going to speak to basic leadership skills, onboarding, training your frontline supervisors as one of the important jobs that you have. Oftentimes creating a learning organization is one of your mission components. And then oftentimes, the whole talent management, of which these performance feedbacks, mentoring opportunities, how do we understand what the goals of those who work for us are, and all of this in light of having an inclusive workforce and dealing with those pesky millennials that we're all dealing with these days. And I say that with love in my heart. I have three sons who are all married to millennials and are millennials, so I say that with recognizing that they are our future, and we need to know how to connect with them and how to encourage them to be the best they possibly can. So we talk about basic leadership skills for the front line. So here's a story I'm just going to tell real quickly, and this is absolutely a true story. And when I was sharing with our learning manager who onboarded with me 10 years ago at the same time, and I was sharing with him this story that I'm going to tell you, he looked at me and said, I tell that story all the time. And here's kind of how the story goes. So when I graduated from the Air Force, if you will, after 31 years, I, as a retiring general officer moving into a new line of work, if you will, I had this thought that, maybe I should write a book on leadership, because I certainly have some opinions about leadership. I've seen good leadership. I have an understanding of what that takes, and I would be even so bold to say that in many ways I'm a good leader. So maybe I ought to write this book on leadership. And actually, true story, I walked into the Georgia Congress Center, and I went to the International Training and Development Congress that was going on there, and I walked in and I saw a sea full of people talking about leadership and leadership books and all this stuff, and I immediately said, that's a red ocean. We don't need another book talking about leadership stories. And so I kind of put that on the background, and then I started teaching these tools of flawless execution. And then I started asking myself really kind of a fundamental question. I said, what is leadership? What do we even mean by leadership? Because, we talk about the output of leadership. The output is collaborative plans, accountability, inclusiveness, communication skills, and we talk about, you know, what these things kind of look like, but it doesn't really meet kind of the practical definition of what leadership is. And I even look at my 3 sons, and I have 3 sons that are, one's 36, 34, and 32 or so. And if you met them, you would all say they are all classic leaders. And I look at them, and I somewhat embarrassingly ask myself, how did they become good leaders? And, you know, they did sports, they did all the different things. And then I look at my middle son who did all those things, and he is truly a really good leader in terms of holding people accountable and working within an organization. In any case, I look and I said, well, first off, what is good leadership? And I really came up with kind of a working idea. And if this resonates with you, I'd love to hear from you. If it doesn't resonate, I'd love to hear from you. But here's kind of my working idea. When I think about being a leader within an organization, so when I'm sitting down and I'm talking to the HR team or I'm talking to the C-suite, and they say one of the things that we need is we need better leaders. And so I asked myself, well, what does that mean? And the working definition that I come up with to describe what I think is all about leadership in a business context is, I would like, when I say I want you to be a leader, I want to be able to assign you a job, a project, an opportunity, a mission, if you will. I would like to be able to assign you 3 or 4 people to work with you. And as the leader of that team, I would like for you to be able to collaboratively develop a plan to accomplish this work, this mission, this project, this opportunity development. I'd like you to be able to plan to develop, to create a plan and have that plan be accountable. And I would like you to hold your team accountable as you execute that plan. And then in my world, I think it's really important, based upon my military experience and flying experience, I think it's really important that you know as a leader that you recognize that you have a responsibility to debrief and ask yourself in an open, honest way, and ask your team, how did we do? Did we accomplish the work? What can we learn from it so that if we did work like this again, we would be a better, more high-performing team? So that's my working definition of when I, as a senior leader, look at somebody, look at a crowd of folks and say, hey, I need you to be leaders. And my question instantly becomes, well, who teaches you how to do that? Where do you learn how to do that? I mean, I've got a Georgia Tech kid, I got 2 University of Florida kids, and you probably might instantly say, if you're from Georgia, well, they should have gone to Georgia, of course. That's where they'd learn leadership. But I'm yet to find somebody who actually tells me where those leadership skills are taught. And then I look, frankly, at our model, and I say, that's the tools of flawless execution are a leadership set of tools that if you learn, and the processes that we teach are really all about how to be a good leader for your team. And I look at my kids and I say, if I assigned you a project and I taught you how to use this tool, you would be a good leader. So one more kind of true story that has supported this as I've gone around the country, and my colleagues have done the same thing, is we oftentimes, and I literally just pulled this off my desk. This working with one of my current clients' organization, one of their leadership models that they do frontline leadership training is around these 8 points of team leadership and 8 points of team membership. And if you flip this over on the back side, it would talk about some of the eight traps of leadership and 8 traps of membership. But I just want to look at it for just a second and say, if you look at each one of those are really outcomes of being a good team leader. The outcomes, that you know how to explain the context. Just realize there's a typo in my client's work there. Explain the context and purpose of the project we're on. Identify the critical issues. Get collaborative contributions to resolve identify, address, and resolve those critical issues. Make a decision, accountability, assign those tasks, monitor progress, coach the team members, review the activity. So once again, those are all things that typically when you go to leadership classes or you read leadership books, they tell you a story about why it's so important that everybody understands what the purpose is. But how do they give them a process to say, if you follow this process, you'll get all those outcomes? So once again, I just pulled from one of our other clients one of the tools that we use called a quick reference card that shows the 6 steps of mission planning. So this is one of our core when we talk about creating a collaborative plan, whether we're doing this in the daily planning environment, maybe for a construction team or a refinery team, or we're using it with a sales team that's trying to roll out a sales campaign, or we're working with software project management that's trying to roll out a product. We always use these 6 steps. So think about it. So follow my logic. The way we work with this is we tell the team, when you sit down as the leader of the team, step 1, determine the mission objective. You know, what is the clear, measurable, achievable, aligned to the high definition destination? What is the objective that we're going to accomplish? So, and we teach them how to create that. Well, that's step 1 over in team leadership, right? Explain the context and purpose. Then our next step, identify the threats. What are the obstacles to success? Well, that's step 2 over in the team leadership, identifying the critical issues. Encourage others to contribute. How do you do that? Well, you know what? If we look at the team and we say, you tell me what the threats are. You tell me, step 3 over on our process, what are the resources? You tell me what are the lessons learned. And that's where those steps 2, 3, and 4 is where collaboration occurs. And if you follow this process and ask those questions and copy down those questions, then you are going to provide leadership to your team. And then we create the actions. So that's the make a decision, create the tasks. Step 5 is where we create the who, does what, by when, action plan. And then one step that we add that a lot of teams don't use is we say, well, what could go wrong? Because I think you'd all agree with me, from a leadership point of view, executing a plan that all goes perfectly, piece of cake. Executing what happens most of the time is something goes wrong. How do we adapt to it? How do I know about it? What are we going to do about it? How do we deal with the changing world, the contingencies, and how do we pivot? That's all step 6. And just having that thought, teaching leaders to have that thought is absolutely crucial to success. So we teach the 6 steps of mission planning. My point being is that if you want a process, whether it is at the start of onboarding with a team member, or whether it is people that have been identified at various levels within the organization to be future leaders in your organization, then I believe giving them tools such as follow this process, and you will provide these kinds of leadership outcomes to your team. And then as an organization, once you align yourself around this, then there is an efficiency and effectiveness and a mentoring component that just continues to move forward. So that's the first question, right? How does this work with frontline leaders? The second one I'm going to hit just very quickly, but it's really, how do we have a learning organization? Well, the debriefing and capturing the lessons learned and creating a culture that says, hey, we did this work. What can we learn from it? How can we capture the results in such a way that we share it with the rest of the organization so that we're a knowledge and growing organization? That is a key component of our debriefing model. And it applies to projects, to opportunities, to anything that's planned. So I'm going to leave it at that for just a second, and I'll talk a little bit more as I get into this next one where we talk about performance mentoring and reviewing. And so once again, when I look back on my 31 years in the Air Force, I realized that nobody really ever taught me or anybody else that I know of how to have a formal mentoring or a formal review with a direct report that you're responsible for. We talked about being inclusive, about communicating, about being a good listener, about all those kind of behaviors, but how do you actually functionally sit down and have this conversation? And I think, once again, you would all agree with me that having that conversation is a critical leadership skill. And from a talent management point of view, it is a critical component of improving the life expectancy and the success of your organization. So how do we tell people how to conduct these missions? Well, this is the backside of that quick reference card I just showed you, and bullet 2 down there, paragraph number 2, is the stealth debriefing. So once again, a little story that I got to tell you. Probably 7 years ago now, my colleague and I had an opportunity to go attend, actually it was Vanderbilt's mentoring and coaching executive session. So we went there and we spent a week. And in that week, we heard lots of stories. We heard lots of encouragement to listen and encouragement to communicate well and to understand people's backgrounds and be inclusive and all those kinds of things. But never once did we pull out a case study and say, okay, how are you going to sit down with Johnny or June or whoever it might be? How are you going to sit down? What's the first thing that you're going to say? And I remember distinctly shooting a note over to my colleague there and saying, you know, all you got to do is teach the stealth debriefing model. It works for a project, but it also works for individual performance. So when you're sitting down, and I would just kind of walk you through this, when we sit down, the S in the stealth model stands for setting the time, the location, the duration, the preparation. So this is really where we reach out to our direct report and we say, hey, we're going to get together Monday at 2 o'clock, and we're going to talk about your performance over the last 6 weeks or 6 months, and I want you to bring with you a list of the important things that you think you accomplished in the last 6 months, and I'm going to do the same thing. And oh, by the way, fast forwarding, the more we make sure that we have that list and that he has that list, he or she, my direct report, has that list, is critical to the nameless and rankless part of this debriefing. And then step 2 is literally nameless and rankless, and this is where we just keep this thing as impersonal and as fact-driven as we possibly can. Because if we're not open and honest with each other, then we're doing our talent management on behalf of us as individuals and us as the organization a disservice. And then we talk, step 3 is execution versus objectives. Literally, what did you say you were going to do in this reporting period? How did it work out? Is there an opportunity to learn something from that? And this is just the facts. These might be the 6 important things that you said you were going to do. Did you do them? And if they didn't happen, then step 4 on there is analyzing the execution. If they happened really well and they were really successful, why were they really successful? How can you replicate that going forward? If they didn't work out so well, how did that happen? And what can we do from a root cause point of view to fix that into the future? So execution versus objectives, what are the facts? Analyzing, what are those key things that didn't go well or went really well, and what can we agree that you want to do different in the future? And literally step 5 there, lessons learned, is specifically what are you going to do differently coming up this next reporting period? What are you going to do based upon what we learned from this last reporting period, 6 months perhaps, or with our millennials, heavens, they want this feedback every 30 days, right? So and frankly, the shorter termed these feedback sessions are, the easier they are to do if you follow this methodology. So lessons learned, what are we specifically going to do different? And then transferring lessons learned is really an organizational issue. That's the knowledge management component of it. And I would suggest that if as a leader, transferring some of those concerns from a root cause point of view to other leaders within the organization and communicating that information to HR is an important component of being a learning and growing organization. And then finally, we always end on a high note saying, okay, you know, it was great to have this conversation with you. We're going to continue moving forward. We're going to drive towards success. And then, by the way, when we think about, well, what are you going to do next 6 months, next reporting period, and I just switched this back to the 6 steps of mission planning. And you can do this on a personal level. So you as a emerging leader within our organization, what are your objectives for the next 6 months? And we recognize that we're not going to talk about everything that you're doing, but what are the key 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 things that you're going to do over the next 6 months? What are the threats to your accomplishing those things? What resources do you need? How can I help you? How can I help you get access to those resources? Perhaps it's training, perhaps it's carving out specific time. Any lessons learned from having done this before? Okay, what's your action plan? And then what could go wrong with that action plan? So once again, these 6 steps of mission planning applied to an individual's performance during a reporting period or in a mentoring, you know, your mission objective might be to get an advanced degree or a certain level of training. Okay, what's that mission objective look like? When do you want to have that done by? Okay, what are the threats to that? What are your workforce threats? What resources do you need in order to be able to do that? What are the lessons learned? So you can use this process to help in a mentoring fashion, kind of moving forward. So, in summary, what I hope that you see is that one of the terms, and understand that one of the terms that we use in flawless execution is that everything that we do is a leader-led process. And what we mean by that, and I think you'd all agree with me, that whether it's our tools of flawless execution or Afterburner, whether it's our book Flawless Execution, whether it's our knowledge management system Flawless Execution, none of that matters unless you as a leader embrace it and use it. So we can talk all day about good outcomes and communication skills and those things, but if we don't have tools and you don't act, then nothing changes. But what I hope that you'll see from the conversation today is really sort of our passion here, that if improving your frontline leadership is important to you and your organization. And I'll just give you one anecdotal observation. One team in particular, a construction team that we rolled out using these tools in the daily frontline leader workforce doing construction work on a daily basis. The outcome of giving their leaders these tools to have leadership conversations improved their safety, improved their performance, their output. But here's what really surprised the organization that we were working with is that their employee retention improved, shot to the top of their industry experience. And the point is that creating better leaders, creating better leadership conversations improves the execution and the job satisfaction, especially of millennials, but for your entire organization. And then leadership development, being a learning organization through the plan, brief, execute, debriefing, learning from what we do, sharing that across the organization. That's a major component of what we teach, perhaps less so in this HR environment. But then this whole idea of how do we mentor our folks? How do we have those leadership conversations with people who are our directs or even some of our colleagues? How do we help them plan to be better? How do we help them plan to be better leaders? How do we help them plan to be successful within their organizations in their selected professions? So I hope that this all makes sense to you. One of the tools that is important to us is what we call our Accelerator Academy. And step 3 that we talked about, developing the empowering and equipping and embedding, which is really giving sustainment tools. One of the most important sustainment tools that we've rolled out recently is this Accelerator Academy, where your frontline leaders can go into the tools of flawless execution from the Accelerator Academy and get and learn how to use the 6 steps of mission planning, learn how to set the tone in a stealth debriefing. Again, lots of how-to kinds of information that's really exciting that's in there. So I would really encourage you to take a look at that. And so just wrapping it up, I would love to hear from you. I thank you so much for being an audience today and being able to share how some of these tools of flawless execution can really improve the frontline leadership within your organization, cascading up and down to help drive performance within your organization. And we all know that that managing talent, having open and honest, real conversations throughout your organization about performance issues, mentoring issues, improvement opportunities, growth opportunities, those are the keys to sustaining your workforce and even to some extent managing the workforce to make sure that the right people continue to work for you and that you have the information needed to move people into other areas if they're not in the right area. So that's kind of a gentle way to say making sure you got the right people. So right now I'm going to stop and I'm going to ask Ansley if we have any questions that have popped up that we might take a few minutes and answer over the next 5 minutes or so.
Thank you, Chad. The first question we have, how does the flawless execution model assure everyone is getting the right training and not just good training?
Well, so how do we know if it's the right training or if it's just good training? Obviously, the answer to that is, well, we debrief your performance. So if the root cause of performance issues points down to, I wasn't trained to do that, and it's got to be open and honest, then the beauty of that is that now we can go back to the training department and say, I have a individual who says that they never received the proper training to accomplish a mission that they've been asked to accomplish. We can then debrief the curriculum, if you will, and see if that information is in there. We can debrief, perhaps if we wanted to, the actual delivery of that curriculum and find out if in fact, hey, I wasn't getting that right training. And now the beauty, of course, is from a root cause point of view, if we improve the training process, then we affect many employees, current and future, but if we just go solve one person's problem by giving them just-in-time training or retraining them, then we've only improved the outcome for one person. So the debriefing is really the key, and recognizing, one of the challenges I always ask folks is, ask yourself in your organization, what would a culture of debriefing look like, and what could it do for us?
How often do you see companies iterating or providing feedback with this model?
So, as I already mentioned, unfortunately, and let me answer from 2 points of view. So that question asked the question with this model. Unfortunately, the issue is that you should have an agreed upon methodology or a set of methodologies within your organization to give to mentoring leaders, evaluating leaders, people who have those responsibilities, you ought to have a common model or set of models. So my first answer is I see very few organizations that understand that giving them a model is critical. I see people talking about it in good organizations and talking about the outcomes, but I see very few giving them an actual model. So is that it?
Well, I think we have time for one more question. Is flawless execution directed towards team advancement or the advancement of an individual?
Yeah, great question. So, you know, one of the things that we say, especially when we're doing our flawless execution training programs are more extensive, is that everything that we're going to share with you works for a team, it works for an individual, and it works for an organization. So, you know, individual performance, small team performance, organizational performance. And we know that there's important components of that at all levels. Here's what's also exciting, is that the tools of flawless execution apply to you in your business, in your personal life, and in your community life. We passionately believe that when you give these tools to individuals, they become better citizens. They become better family members. They become better workers. And what we know is that the community that we live in and these kinds of skills will improve every aspect of our lives, in every aspect of our life.
And that's all the time we have today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And Chaz, I'll let you close.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Once again, you can connect with me at ccampbell@afterburner.com. Love to hear your questions, and I'd certainly invite you to take a look at our webinar at our website and learn some of these tools, and hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon.